what is the lowest you can charge? So if you have a job, you might be able to support yourself. You may be able to do pro bonos. But if this is your business, you may not be able to do as many pro bonos as somebody who's independently wealthy.
Where instead of a one lump sum at the beginning, which is hard for a lot of people, or a bit more challenging, they will spread payments out over three payments over the first 3 months, or quarterly. I mean, the sky's the limit on how you do this.
They haven't actually experienced that kind of value. So what are they comparing to? Sometimes it's like, well, it's expensive, but compared to what? Like, what are you comparing to, right?
If you're dreading doing something, it's probably indication that you need to rethink what it is that you're offering or how you're offering it.
Coaching, we tend to take everything personal. It's about me. Like, in some ways it is, because it's your relationships and it's your personal communication with people, but it's also a business, and businesses try to build relationships with people too. Your coaching business is building relationships with people, whether you like it or not.
What's up, Coaches Nation? Another amazing episode of the Coach's Journey podcast with two hosts today. I'm Dr. Sherry Fluellen, a psychologist and certified high-performance coach, and here with the amazing Danielle Fernandez, who is also a certified high-performance coach and a bunch of other amazing certifications that he uses. He whips it out with his clients to be able to help them in all these different ways in their businesses. We are going to talk about one of the biggest challenges that coaches face as they're working on getting clients. And the challenge is, what do you do when your client says, I can't afford that, or some version of that? It might feel you're backed into a corner and now you have to defend your pricing, but there's actually at least 8 different ways we're going to briefly unpack for you today to get you out of the box of feeling trapped, angry, scared, nervous, and whatever other emotions come up when that sort of scenario happens. So hopefully we'll be able to get you to think about things a little bit differently. Super excited for this. How about you, Daniel?
I love that. That's great. I think this is like, at every level for a coach, whether you're a beginner or intermediate or advanced or elite or whatever you are, there's gonna be people who can't afford to coach with you, and that's okay. There's also gonna be people who can, right? So that's okay too, right? So don't get fixated. Number one, don't get fixated on the people who can't afford to coach with you, but it doesn't mean you can't serve those people. So we're gonna get into a whole bunch of stuff here, and I'm really curious to pick your brain, Sherry, as always, on like your experiences here and the things we can learn from each other today.
Absolutely. So, I think there's 2 major, maybe even more than just 2, maybe 2 to 3 major categories that we can lump responses into. One would be, this is, internally, this is how I'm thinking. This is my package. This is how I do things. And you either accept it or maybe you're not the right fit. So like that's one kind of way to think about it. If you want to be super kind of rigid or inflexible, and I don't mean that in a judgmental way. Because there's, I've been in a position before where, I'm evaluating my time, my energy, what's it worth? And there are times where I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to budge with the price, or I'm not going to budge with how the coaching fits into my life. And that's totally fine. You have the right to do that. So there's kind of, it is what it is, and they accept it or not. Then I think there's this other gray area of, well, I've got a little bit of flexibility. And can we work on finding a middle ground in some way that works for both? And then I think there's also kind of on the other end of the spectrum, maybe, I did this as a psychologist, I did this where I had services that I offered for free or pro bono, and I kind of already had a structure set up. So there could be like, maybe you just work with them without pay, or you offer some other type of service that maybe can kind of help, but it's not fully what they need, but it's what is available. So there's lots of these variations and versions that we're going to talk about today. Daniel, where do you want to start?
I like the spectrum you outlined. So there's one dimension of like, how flexible or rigid are you with the offer that you made, right? You can be like, oh no, this is the price, and this we're doing exactly, this is what I offer, and that's totally legit. You can say this is the program I offer, this is what I do, and this is what it costs. Or this is your investment, whichever way you want to talk about it. And that's what it is. If you can't afford it, that's okay. And then, or maybe there's room to budge. And there's a whole spectrum all the way down to like pro bono, which can be appropriate in some cases. I'm not saying go do pro bono for everybody. I'm also not saying go be rigid for everybody. I think you're going to have to decide for yourself where you land on that spectrum in general and in a specific case, right? So I like that dimension of rigidity versus flexibility, and then where do you land? And whatever your answer is for you personally as a coach is right. It's like it's up to you. There's no wrong answer and there's no right answer. There might be some answers that are not good for you, so beware of those answers. There might be some cases where you're being so rigid, you might have gotten the client with a little bit of flexibility, and that would have been worth it to you, and you have to decide that for yourself. There might be some cases where you went pro bono, but you didn't need to, and that might have been not worth it for yourself. And so you have to decide for you what is worth it. And sometimes that comes down to also knowing what is worth it to you in general, which is the floor of what you can charge. Like we like to call it the floor. Like, what is the lowest price you can give for what you're offering, or what is the offer that you can give that is still worth it for you, and below which it isn't anymore. So, for example, if in general you have a job and you're doing your coaching on the side, you only have 10 hours, 12 hours, maybe 20 hours max to dedicate to your coaching, and you only have so many spaces available for clients. If you fill those up with pro bono clients, you're probably never going to make money if you're always giving pro bono. But at the same time, at the beginning of your career, you might want to do some pro bono clients so that you can get experience and confidence, so you can feel comfortable charging money, right? So it's like, where are you at in your timeline of growth? Where are you at in what you need? And do you know, like, what is the lowest you can charge? So if you have a job, you might be able to support yourself. You may be able to do pro bonos. But if this is your business, you may not be able to do as many pro bonos as somebody who's independently wealthy.
Yeah.
So I think that's one dimension that you outlined. Then sure, you identified another dimension, which I would call creativity, which is like, okay, like what other offers could we have, right? What could we do together, right? And so if somebody comes to me and says like, oh, like I would like to work with you, and I say, this is how I work with clients typically, and they're like, well, that's not going to work with me. So I said, typically I work with clients for a year because that's how long sometimes it takes, or 6 months minimum. And one of my clients, this was actually an older client who came back to me and says like, I really want to work together. I made him an offer for a year-long package. And he said, well, I kind of think a monthly is the right cadence for me. We talked through it, and I think we both agreed that actually would be a good cadence. So I made him a 1-year offer of monthly coaching, which was very unique. I don't normally make that offer, but I was able to figure out how to do that together, and I sent him an offer after we discussed it. So so I was going to be flexible in that case. In some cases, I won't be flexible because I know that would not work for this client. If we're meeting every month and they're not going to make that progress in the month they need, it's not going to be appropriate for them. Then they're not going to have a good experience. They're not going to feel like they've made the change. It's not going to make a difference for them. And so I'm not willing to do that if I think that's the case. But for him, I knew what that would do. So that was an interesting case. So flexibility is another dimension that we can talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I heard you say is, or how I would think about that is adjusting your offering. And I think there's a lot of things to think about when we consider adjusting offerings for clients or potential clients. And what I pulled out of what you said is that this is a client that you knew, and so you're willing to adjust it because you already had confidence that the client would gain value out of it.
Yeah.
And I did that for a client as well. I did monthly sessions, one session a month, and he hadn't been my client yet, but I've known him for years, and I knew the kind of person he was and how seriously he took coaching. So I was willing to do monthly. But normally, for somebody that I didn't know, exactly as you were saying, I don't know that they are going to be able to maintain the type of momentum that coaching can provide if it's too far spaced. So when we think about adjusting our offering, I do think it's really important for us to think about as coach, well, what is the outcome that I'm offering or that we are working towards? I was trying to avoid using the word promise because we don't promise anything. We can't because our clients do the work. But what is
we can promise a couple things. We can promise that we'll show up. We can promise to do our best, but we can't promise what they're going to do.
In the context of the outcome, I can't promise them a specific outcome, or at least I don't feel I am ethically able to promise them a specific outcome. And so whatever the outcome is that we're moving towards, can I adjust my offering enough to where I have the confidence that there's still going to be a good testimony when the coaching is done. So I think that's a framework. So we can adjust the offering.
Yeah.
Another thing that we can do is adjust and have some flexibility in the payment, and not necessarily the price, but how many payments they make. So this is probably one of the most common flexible, points that I see coaches do. And I've done this. Daniel, I know you've done this. Faisal has done this. So many people in the coaching mastery community have done this, where instead of a one lump sum at the beginning, which is hard for a lot of people or a bit more challenging, they will spread payments out over three payments over the first 3 months or quarterly. I mean, the sky's the limit on how you do this. The one that I did most recently is I took the annual amount and I just spread it out quarterly. And so it was an automatic fee that came out every 3 months. And then when the year was done, then we were good. And so I knew this person. I had confidence that I had pretty good confidence that they weren't going to be like, bow out and kind of like disappear halfway through, because that's also something that you need to think about is at least making sure they're making payments that are consistent with the value in the sessions that you've already provided. But there's lots of flexibility in payment plans.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. You said making them automatic. I think that's really important too, because I've been through the place where you don't have them automatic, and then you're scrambling to catch up. Oh, were they supposed to pay this month, or what was the schedule again? It's just another piece of the puzzle that you have to remember. And then if they forget to pay, then you have to ask them to pay. So like having it be automatic is really beneficial. You can do automatic payments from the get-go. Do that.
Yes.
Instead of like having to do the runaround, because like, is somebody going to schedule it and remember it in their calendar? You don't know, right? Would you like to have an extra piece of the puzzle to worry about? No. So like, let's keep your energy focused on serving and being the coach that you can be, so that because you have the confidence those payments are going to go through. And with those automatic payments, make sure that you get notified if it doesn't go through. That's the other piece of the automation. Like, make it automatic and make it message you in a way that you'll get if it doesn't work out, so that then you can follow up if you have to. But don't make it so you have to follow up to get the payment. I've done that. That sucks. That's terrible.
Totally.
Yeah, because then you have to basically resell the thing you've already sold to get another payment, and that doesn't feel good to anybody. But like, you don't need to go justifying. Like, part of the benefit of doing a longer term coaching program is that you can build momentum over time. And after the first few sessions, they should be feeling some momentum, but they won't be feeling like anywhere close to what they'll be feeling in 3 months, right? So sometimes I'll say like, hey, the payments are like divided in 3, but you pay month 1, month 2, month 3, but it's going to last a year for the program, as an example, to make it more easy for them to make the payments. But it can be a slippery slope if you give them too many options. I like to make sure that there's like 1 or 2 options for payment plans, and also that those payment plans are not exactly the same as the full pay total amount. Like, so if you're paying X dollars for a 6-month program and you have a 2-pay, it's half it is paid up front plus a little bit. Like, you're gonna add 5 or 10% so that it's worth it for them to pay full if they want to save that money. But it's a little bit, more work for you as a coach to track that or to make sure that that happens. And so there's a little bit extra that you charge for that to give them that convenience. I think that's fair.
Yeah. So and one other example that I had not considered before for coaching. So my husband and I joined a professional community, not for coaching, but for another strategy, another life business. And it's interesting because my husband signed us up for a year, but we paid monthly. And then at 2.5 months, I get this email that says, "Hey, by the way, remember that if you pay in full by the end of the 3rd month, you can get the original paid in full price." And I was like, yes. And the reason I think that was so genius is because it hooked us. We were able to get in at a much lower price. But then, because we'd been in it for a few months, we saw the immense value.
Right.
And now I was willing to, like, I'm fully committed for the year. And if I can save money on the full year amount, then I'm totally going to do that. So I hadn't actually thought about applying that to coaching before it happened for me as the member of this community. I was like, that's a genius strategy.
Yeah, I love that. I've seen that before, and I like it for the fact that, like, you don't, like, some people will come in and pay the monthly and think like, if this doesn't work out, I can just stop it.
Exactly.
Which creates a problem when you have a coaching agreement to pay up front for the year, and you're, as a coach, you're committing to that journey with them, and they're committing to you. So sometimes that happens, especially at the beginning. When you're starting to coach, that happened to me once, where they promised to pay at the beginning, and then after 6 sessions in about 6 weeks, and then they didn't make the second payment. So because I wasn't a good enough coach for them at the time, and I had a lot of work to do. So this is early in my journey, and that's okay. That's called learning. But if you have a couple of payments up front, and then say, like, by the way, your next payment, if you want to do it all up front, now you can lock in the original price, not the 5 or 10% higher price. What what they know at this point is like, oh yeah, I was gonna stay with this at this. Like they've been through a few sessions with you. They're like, I'm definitely staying for the whole time. And that gives you data too. If you offer that and they do take it up, and that means they're really, really telling you I'm committed for the whole thing, and I'm gonna make the figure it out. If they don't, it doesn't mean they're not committed, but it's just a good data point for you to notice, right? If they are like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna get the best deal by committing all my payments now. They're pulling that cash forward, so that's kind of helpful to know as a coach.
Absolutely. And that does kind of tie into another strategy that we can use as coaches when somebody is like, I just can't afford that, is being able to provide another type of service. So instead of necessarily saying, well, normally I do 12-month, let's do 6-month, maybe this is an opportunity if you have a lot of people that are in a lot of ways your ideal client, but maybe don't have the funds, is now maybe this is an opportunity to create a group coaching program so that you're able to serve them. It's at a lower price point for them, but it may actually be at a higher price point for you as you get a few clients because it's the same hour with potentially more income. And maybe those sorts of programs lend themselves a little bit more easily to monthly pay or multiple pays rather than a year of individual coaching. And Daniel, I know you are literally an expert on group coaching. So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts around a coach adding another kind of level to their offering?
Um, yeah, the simplest way for a coach to do that, if you haven't ever offered a group program but you think you could, and think you're ready to have more than one person that you're coaching at the same time, and there's things to think about there, but you know what? You can always try it and see how it works for you, and decide whether it is or isn't for you. But you can make an offer like, um, if you don't want to do the one-on-one at this price, well, at a price that's a lot lower, we can make it a group program, and you might be the first person, right? You can say, hey, if you, I don't have a group, I was thinking about starting a group. Let's put you at first in the group. It'll be a group, but you'll be by yourself for the first little while I get more people in. And then they're gonna get the benefit of one-on-one coaching at the beginning. And then when you
Yeah.
bring your next person in, they're like, yeah, there's somebody joining this group, right? Remember you got the group price? And then you can have them connect with each other and learn from each other, especially if they're kind of working on similar things. If you have a niche that you're working on, like this kind of person or these kinds of problems, then they will have something to share with each other, and that can be very valuable to them too. But if you get 3 or 4 people into that group, now for the same amount of time of coaching, you are potentially making the same amount of money that you would have made. That could be a one way to bring more people in at a lower price point for them. The only thing is you have to now do a lot more promoting in a different way. But you know what? You're promoting anyways, right? You're doing your discovery sessions. You're bringing people in. There's going to always be people who might not be ready for your individual program, but they might be ready for a group program that's a lower price. So hopefully, if you are disciplined and habitual about your outreach and about your follow-up and about your offers and inviting people into your programs, you have this what's called a downsell, where you go, not the original program, but a different program at a lower price could be a good fit. But I think something else that's coming to mind here, Sherry, is that a lot of people say we can't afford your program, or we can't, it's too expensive. That might be just an objection in disguise. That might not mean they can't. Like sometimes if people can't afford your program, it's not actually the case. Like a lot of times they might say like I just can't afford it, or it's not financially possible for me. It might be true, but it might not be true. It's an opportunity to explore objections. So before you downsell or go pro bono, you should find out like what does that really mean to this potential client, right? It might be that they don't actually realize how valuable it would be,
Yeah.
and you haven't made the case yet well enough, or maybe there's some other objection that they below the surface that they haven't really surfaced yet. So coaching through those things together might actually be a way to get them to purchase the original program offer too, right? So you don't necessarily know for sure that they can't afford it until you've explored that with them on a more a deeper basis instead of just a superficial. A lot of people will say like, oh my gosh, $10,000 or whatever your price is. Like, that's crazy. But like, they may not have ever had coaching before. They may not know how this works. They might not know how valuable it is. Maybe they've had your discovery session and they know that that was a valuable conversation. But being in it repeatedly over and over again, they haven't experienced that kind of value. So what are they comparing to? Sometimes it's like, well, it's expensive, but compared to what? Like, what are you comparing to, right? So,
Absolutely.
and then you can get a feel for what they value.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And as you were saying that, I was just thinking through, we were talking about handling objections that people are going to throw out there. And there's so many different ways in being able to do that, but I love that you're basically pointing out that they probably don't really understand the value that they're getting. I think it was Alex Hermosi that used an analogy or an example once that I just thought was funny. And it was something to the effect of, if you approach a guy with no money and you say, "Hey, you want to buy a Ferrari, but it's going to cost you $10,000." Even though they don't have $10,000, they know the value of a Ferrari, they're going to figure it out. And so often it really isn't
Mm.
about the money per se, but it's about the money in relationship to the perceived value that they're getting. So then the challenge to you as the coach is, how do you help them understand the value? And so that's a whole other, podcast series, and how do you help people
Mm.
understand the value. But just know that that might be, and rather not just might be, that probably is, I would say 100% of the time, there's always an opportunity as a coach that we can continue to refine our ability to help educate and emotionally communicate to our potential clients the value of the coaching.
I love that Ferrari example. It's like, so here's something you can do in the discovery session or the strategy session, whatever you want to call it, that you can do with people. It's just like, ask them after you had a little discussion about something, ask them, like, was that discussion valuable to you? What was valuable to you? Why was that valuable to you? Like, that's just a simple way, like, for you to help them realize the value. Because a lot of time you don't realize what's valuable to you until somebody points it out, or you take the moment to reflect. So don't just wait till the end of the session to ask them what they enjoyed or what was valuable to them. Find out along the way, like, what was valuable about that to you. And that's a good reminder for me. I can do more of that along the way, right? And we have, in Coaching Mastery Community, we have a discovery session framework to deliver those sessions to sell your coaching. And we do go through different sections of that. One's the connection, the rapport, and one is the talking about goals and perceptions and long-term vision and all that stuff, right? There's sections in there. So maybe if you're following that framework, which can be really powerful for selling your coaching, if you don't know it, find it and go get it. But look at each section, and then once you've done a particular section or discussion, then ask them, was that discussion valuable?
Mm.
Right? And then you can say, like, what's most valuable about that and why? And then they'll tell you what's valuable. And then at the end of the session, or when you're doing your sales call or offer, it might be that session, or it might be a different call, then you can remember what they found valuable, where the value is. Look, where's the value for them? Because they'll tell you, and that'll help you point it out. Because the whole point of this is this coaching is going to be valuable to them. If it's not valuable to them, maybe you shouldn't be making them an offer. This is good. It's a good reminder for coaches, right? Like, after, when you draw a full stop after a conversation, that's the time to put the value lens on it, right? If they got their action item, or if they got their decision, or if they got their progress or their aha or the clarity, now how is that valuable? Think about
Yes.
that.
One of the things that we notice in newer coaches and even seasoned coaches, I fall into this trap too, is that I'm trying to solve the problems for my clients. Because don't we feel good when we can see their problem, come up with a solution, and hear them say, "Oh my gosh, you're brilliant. I'm going to do that."
Yeah.
Like, isn't that kind of sort of in our fantasy? I think most people, like, it feels good. So the trap that we can get into in this particular scenario, where our client or potential client is saying, "I can't afford it," is for us to jump right to problem solving, such as, "Well, let's do set up a payment plan," that sort of thing. But maybe what if, instead of jumping right into problem solving mode, is you actually jump into, how can I empower my client even more and help them problem solve the issue? So one way you could do this is say, if price wasn't the issue, is there anything else standing in the way? And if you get them to a point where they're like, "No, literally, no, like nothing else is a problem. It's literally just a price," then you can say, "Hey, you know, part of what I do in coaching is helping people work through and problem solve some of their biggest challenges in life. And this right now is a big challenge for you. Are you open to us, working together to problem solve this?" And then, use your expertly uh, expertly placed questions around their budget or like what money means to them and help them figure out the solution so that they can own the answer, and then they can have even more confidence going to the coaching because you just helped them solve a problem before you even officially got into the coaching relationship, or you helped them solve another one, because chances are in your strategy session there were some problems that were solved.
Mhm.
But just really wanting to highlight this is an opportunity to empower your potential client and letting them do the heavy lifting on that.
Yeah, and if you're thinking right now that if you help them solve this problem, it was very self-interested of you, well, I want you to pause that thought and think about how confident are you about making a difference for this client, of doing something valuable for them. If you're confident that it's valuable for them and they're telling you they want it, you helping them figure out how to get it is a service that you're doing for them. Just like it would be for anything else in their life they want to get. It's just that you're wrapped up in it because you're delivering the service, right? So
Yeah.
like get yourself out of there. If you're clear that they want to do the coaching and you can help them solve that problem, it just happens to be about you. Don't get too wrapped up in it, right? And they might decide that like this is not right. But your own, and this is natural. It's only natural to feel like a little bit attached to, your own emotions around this because you're trying to help them work with you, right? And you're gonna get a sale, right? But it's not about you and it's not about your sale. It's about serving the client. Because what you're doing is you're demonstrating your ability to serve the client for their benefit.
Yeah.
And if it's mutually beneficial, great, right? If you can create a mutually beneficial relationship where you work together, where the relationship serves the client and the client gives you the money, that can be really powerful for both of you, right? But you got to get out of your own way at the beginning and not doubt the value the client is telling you. Like don't stick your brain into their brain. Let them share with you, what they really believe. And if they believe it's valuable, they're telling you that. So you should believe it, right?
Yeah. And that's such an interesting mindset challenge for coaches
Yeah.
is either end of the spectrum. Either I feel somehow scummy because am trying to coach my client into doing something that ultimately pays me. But isn't that that's kind of a necessary part of building a business? So it's not scummy, or at least it in and of itself, it's not scummy. Now you could do it in a scummy way, but that's
Yeah,
another
totally.
conversation. Or the other end of the spectrum where you're like, I don't want to, or maybe the other end of the spectrum is I feel so desperate, like I must, but desperation has a smell, and you do not want to be bringing that into a coaching conversation. So it's like really working on creating the mindset of not being attached to the outcome. If you do your best to help the client make their best decision, and at the end of the day, if you get money out of it, great. And if you don't get money out of it, great. You still served somebody. But really, really kind of finding that middle ground, which takes time and takes practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's no sales session where I don't feel some sense of nervousness or some sense of butterflies or whatever it is. Like no conversation about this because I still, even when I go perform on stage as a musician, like I still feel that. And I've realized it's not actually because it doesn't have to be about me. I can just decide this is important because it's an opportunity to serve. It's an opportunity to make a difference. It's an opportunity to perform on stage, or it's an opportunity to have this client uh, be served in a much more powerful way. That's how I want to interpret that emotion rather than like, oh, like it's like looking inward to myself and like, what are my emotions telling me? And like, oh, well, I could face rejection, or maybe I'm a scummy salesperson, like the car salesman, trope or whatever. But people buy all kinds of things that are
Yeah.
way less valuable than coaching for way more money than coaching. And so it's up
Yeah.
to them to decide what the value is. And you're here as the enabler or the empowerer of their decision making, whether it's about your coaching or whether it's about something else in their relationships or their work or whatever it is that you work with them on. You become that trusted person to help them make really great decisions for themselves.
Yes. Now there's another strategy if you get this response of like, I just can't afford it. And maybe you've problem solved with them and you've done some of these other strategies. Well, there's another strategy that you've even used and talked about recently, Daniel. And that is maybe you refer them to another coach who charges less than you. That's another option. And one of the reasons why I love this option is because it shows that you're still dedicated to helping problem solve for the client. It's just you don't always have to be the answer for everybody. So the client potentially wins because they're still getting served. You are building a more collegial relationship with another coach because you are giving them a client potentially. So it really can increase kind of the level of professionalism that your whole business is about. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about when you did that recently or when you were
Oh
thinking
yeah.
about that.
So number one, I say if you do this strategy, make sure you trust that coach because
Yes.
this client is relying on you as a trusted person in their life now to refer you. So you make sure you have a long-standing relationship with this coach, or you know them, or you have some way to trust them in terms of the quality and how they're going to treat your client. Because if they don't do a great job of treating them well, that's going to reflect on you, and they might come back to you and be like, "What the heck?" And if you don't want that to happen, so establish a trusted relationship with this coach. And that's usually not just a single conversation. So this is somebody I've known for a while, a coach that I've worked together with. We've coached together. We've coached on similar programs and stuff in the past, and so we have similar certifications. We know each other for a decade. And I had a client who came to me. We did honestly two or three, might have been three, discovery type sessions to work through what is this a good fit, because I wasn't sure if it was a great fit. And they even brought it up. They weren't sure, but as we were working through it, we thought maybe there's something here. So I said, like, I could put together a package for you based on their budget and based on, because we had talked through a few things and it wasn't a perfect fit. And my instinct was like, this isn't probably the perfect fit client for me. But I wanted to help them, so by giving them something that was an offer. So I went and worked on the offer, and I worked on it for a few days, and I'm like, this I don't think this is gonna work for me. And I couldn't, in good conscience, commit to a client with something that I didn't feel excited to make it work for me.
Yeah.
So what I did is I contacted this other coach, and I told them, hey, would you be available at this time frame for this many sessions, and what's your rate, and could we talk through like what would be the package? And I said like I would offer them maybe 2 or 3 sessions with me, and then 1 or 2 dozen sessions with you. How could that work? So I got the details worked out, went back to them, sent them a note saying, hey, here's what I can't do the original plan we had because we discussed it as client and coach, and it didn't really work. I couldn't find a way to make it work, but I've been working on it anyway because I want to make sure you are supported. And so I talked to another coach. Here's a little bit about that coach. I didn't tell them who you are or any of your details yet. I wanted you to, well, if you could get to know them and have a call with them, you'd know that they're a great coach. And here's what we agreed on that would work for you. If you like this, great. If not, then you can choose. You can decide. You can decide what you want. So this client, she took some time and decided against it, which is totally fine. And she had some other support going forward at that point in her life, which is what I really wanted to make sure of, right? I just want to make sure there's some path forward for her, and we'll probably stay in touch. I'm not gonna just probably just let it be and never talk to her again. I probably will keep in touch at some point, and maybe in the future she might become a client for me or this other person or some collaboration, and that's possible still. But I can feel good about how I served. I made a difference. I gave them an offer that I thought was really good for them and good for the coach and good for me, and it didn't work out, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess it did work out, right?
Yes. And so there, another example of something that I've done is and this is kind of adjusting the offering instead of doing, it's kind of giving them a taste of, instead of doing the full year, which is what I typically do, and they not super sure on exactly how coaching was going to fit. And it's just that clarity and that value proposition we're still trying to figure that out. So one of the things I did, which was fun for me, which is why I offered it, because if it wasn't something fun for me, I wouldn't even offer it. I encourage you as a coach, if you're dreading doing something, it's probably indication that you need to rethink what it is that you're offering or how you're offering it.
Yeah.
But this person lived in another state, and I just so happened to be flying to where this person lived, or about 20 miles from there. And I was like, hey, how about this? How about we work on this one problem I gave them a couple options, either like 2 hours or like a full day. actually it was 4 hours or a full day. I said, we could either do just a morning session, or I can spend the entire day with you and we're going to knock out, kind of these goals. And he opted for that. He's like, yeah, actually I would love that. So that's another thing where you can give them a little taster. Obviously it doesn't have to be in person if it doesn't work out that way, but you can offer something like in the mental health world, we call that a brief intervention. We can offer a brief intervention that can help them get unstuck. And it can be more intentional. The strategy session, the way that the coaching mastery community has it set up, it does contain like a brief intervention, but maybe it's not as much or as intentional as what could they want. So you could say, hey, you know what? For a fee, like, for whatever that makes sense to you, we could do this intensive, this short term, intensive that can give them a taste and can get them their appetite whetted and understand the process a little bit more than just a 90-minute strategy session or 60 or 2 hour, whatever it is that you typically do. So that is another option that could make sense for you with certain clients in certain scenarios.
Yeah, I like that. I think the word intensive is common in the coaching world, or a VIP day. I
Yep.
think that's a great idea for an offer. Like, hey, let's do an intense, uh, dedicated time block together, where we both commit that time and see how much you can get out of it. And maybe after something like that, they'll want to work with you on a regular basis, and maybe they won't. But either way, you made a difference. You sold a package of, even if it's just one intensive. You made some money. Made it worth it for yourself because you're thinking about what's worth it to offer, right? Because you know what
Yeah,
isn't worth it, given your trade-offs. And you got to serve somebody else and make a difference, so you can feel good about that, right?
absolutely.
Love that.
The last strategy in my mind is continue to nurture them, continue to stay in relationship with them, check in with them, and at some point they may be ready to jump into your coaching world. So the follow up, the follow through over time is one of the things that is the most challenging literally for every single sales specific market in the world. Like literally follow through, follow up is the biggest challenge any salesperson has. And as a coach, you are also a salesperson 99% of the time, unless you happen to have a job where you're paid to do the thing and not have to ever worry about getting your own clients. But does not tend to be the type of coaches that listen to our podcast. Our podcast is about entrepreneurs, about people that are doing the grind and they're building their own identity, they're building their own network of potential clients. And so maybe you just need to continue to follow up with them. What are your thoughts around that, Daniel?
Yeah, that's typically where coaches fall down, and myself included. I've been in that so many times, and there's a couple of people I just thought of. I'm like, oh, I totally dropped the ball on those people, and I need to follow up on them. But part of the challenge is for coaches is there's an emotional up and down that comes with following up over and over and over again. And sometimes it's like you feel like you're nagging someone, you don't want to get on their nerves, but you're forgetting your confidence about what you can do for them, right? If somebody could change your life and they gave up because their text might be a little annoying, but you would have wished that happened for you, would you not have like been willing to put up with a little more nag, like that like quote nag? Like, part of the reason that somebody signs up with you is because they know that you care enough that you're going to continue to follow up with them sometimes.
Yeah.
So like, in businesses do this all the time. This is a business thing, right? It's not coaching. We tend to take everything personal. It's about me. Like, in some ways it is, because it's your relationships and it's your personal communication with people, but it's also a business, and businesses try to build relationships with people too. Your coaching business is building relationships with people, whether you like it or not. And some of those relationships are like, oh, that person doesn't follow up. And some of those relationships are, oh, this person does follow up with me. And the main point in following up is to demonstrate, A, that you care about them enough to follow up and keep on them with their goals, which reminds me of somebody else I need to follow up with, who I've sent probably 8 or 9 different messages to after initial conversation. And they told me about this dream. And I said, how much progress are you making on this dream? And the answer was nothing. And how long have you had it? 3 years I wanted to do this, and he's not making any progress. So I sent him a bunch of messages, and he stopped responding. Well, he didn't really respond much at all. And so part of me is like, I don't want to follow up again because I don't want to nag him. But I probably still can owe him a couple more messages just to make sure he doesn't lose the dream. That's what I want. And so
Yeah.
there's lots of ways to do that, but I'm probably due for another one at this point on this one. So part of it is because you care about them and their dreams, and you want to make a difference for them. And you know what? Who doesn't want somebody in their life who's trying to make a difference for them? Whether they sign up for coaching or not doesn't matter. Like I don't want him to sit there and like 3 years from now give me the same conversation that, oh, I didn't make any progress on this dream of mine that that is just sitting there. I'm like, well, it's not my fault. I have been trying to help you, you know?
Yeah.
So
Well, it's so easy for assumptions that benefit our lack of activity. And what I mean by that is, yeah, what I heard in your story is that you're making, you could make an assumption of like, oh, I'm nagging. They're not gonna, they're gonna get irritated with me. Like those are all assumptions. And so
yeah,
what if we never made that kind of assumption and just assumed that every time we reached out, it would just demonstrate and show our care? So for example, in a related scenario recently, I had a strategy session with a gentleman who sells whole life insurance. So my husband and I have been talking about doing this whole infinite banking system type thing for years, and it's finally like, okay, we just finally need to do it. So I had the strategy session, got all the stuff figured out, and then there's a process. You got to apply, and they got to do this health stuff and all these things. Well, I got an email that was like, here's the button you need to push basically to get this process going. And I mean, I swear this guy, I feel so bad for him, but this guy sent me no less than 10 emails or text messages reminding me. But the thing was, I just had this little question I couldn't remember the answer to. And it was around, well, like, am I really committing myself to dropping this large chunk of money? And so I just became a little unsure again. Well, he called me and I took his call, didn't realize it was him, which is fine, but I took his call and he's like, hey, do you have any questions? I was like, well, actually, and he's like, oh, yeah, yeah, you're totally not committing to anything. This is just an application process to just see what the end result will be, to see what the money, all that sort of thing. That's all I needed. And I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, okay. So I had this little nagging thing that I wasn't quite sure. And so it wasn't that I didn't want him to contact me. It was totally my issue, not him. And so, but he was very persistent. Kudos to him on his persistence during his follow through. And we need to be a little bit more like that. How about we not assume that we're being annoying and actually assume that we are giving our potential clients the absolute best white glove service possible?
yeah, I think this is a really big deal for coaches and their mindsets, because if you think you're nagging somebody, then maybe you don't know what matters to them. If you know what matters to them, then it's what matters to them. You're plugging into something that matters to them, right? If somebody tells you like, "Oh man, I really wish I could learn Spanish," and you sent them cat videos all the time, they probably see you as a nag. Maybe that might be a fair assumption, unless they love cats. You don't know. But if you
What if
sent
it's
them,
Spanish cats?
yeah, Spanish cats, right? But if you sent them like really cool things that help them with the thing they care about, the Spanish thing. Oh, here's a great vacation that you can take to Mexico where they teach you Spanish, and you get to see, you visit a farm where they're teaching you about, farming in Spanish or something that you can't get here. Like that, they might be like, oh, this is so cool. Thanks for reminding me about this thing I care about. This is really interesting. Maybe I'll do it. So like you're trying to plug into what matters. And part of that is when you connect with people, figure out what matters to them. And then if you know what matters to them, you can actually help them with things that matter to them.
Yeah, I love that. All right. Well, we need to
Awesome.
wrap this up. I think we dropped a whole lot of options and a whole lot of
Yeah.
ways in which we can think about when our next potential client says, or the one that you met with last week, and you just kind of haven't figured out how to handle that. When they
Hmm.
say, oh, I don't know if I can afford this, it's too expensive or whatever. There are so many options
Yeah.
and they're not mutually exclusive. You could rank order them. I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna do this. And if that doesn't work, I'll do like you can do them all or most of them anyway. So hopefully if you need to go back and listen to this, write them down, put it in your own words, in your own language, own it, make it your own. You are going to find your coaching business is much more sustainable and is going to grow more than you ever thought.
Sherry, thank you so much for this conversation. And I think this is one of those things that can hold coaches back a lot. especially at the beginning, because most people that we're going to run into haven't done coaching. They might not know the value. And so I would encourage people to remember what is valuable to the client. You can ask them and find out, make a little note, so you can remember when you're giving them valuable things. It's not nagging, it's valuable, as long as you focus on that. And then there's so many different options, whether it's about flexibility or non-flexibility, both are fine, or if it's about creativity of new options or downsells or whatever, or if it's about exploring the objection, because it might actually not be too expensive for them, but they need to be walked through that. Whatever it is for them, we covered all these things today, but make sure you are staying in the game, because a lot of times coaches don't make money. And we actually have a whole other podcast about why coaches don't make money, and some of these things overlap with some things we talked about today. There's probably a link appearing somewhere right now if you're watching this on a video. But take a look at our other podcasts on why coaches make no money to find out some other strategies and things. But Sherry, thank you for an amazing conversation today. I feel like it's always fun talking to you and exploring these topics.
It is always fun. And thank you, Daniel, for being such an amazing co-host. And until next time, go to cmc.coach and you can learn all about the coaching community that will help you stay plugged in, focused on your business and growing it, moving it forward so that you can serve more people and you can make your business financially sustainable.
All right. See you next time.
Bye.